Yeah, yeah. Ball so hard, you better believe me, it's scary. It's basketball at the bar with Calvin and Barry. So put a tip in the jar, cause these dudes can really fill it up. Whether it's buckets you need or just a beer in a cup. We're here for fresh conversations, got some delicious libations. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications. My boys got you covered like you being guarded by paying. From the glove to the claw and everyone else in between. Calvin and Barry got everything that you need. So sit back, relax, because we're starting the show. It's basketball at the bar, grab your drinks and let's go. Yeah. Grab a drink and let's go. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification. Calvin and Barry. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification. Let's get it.
What up, ballers? Welcome to Basketball at the Bar. Join us live every weekday for the best NBA podcast here on YouTube, where the takes are hot and the drinks are cold. There's no dress code, and you can take us wherever you go. So pull up a stool, drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe. This is Basketball at the Bar. Grab your drinks, and let's go, Calvin. It's Thursday. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
It is a beautiful day here in Maui, Hawaii. It's about 81 degrees outside, slightly breezy, no clouds. A beautiful day to go to the beach, and we're here in the studio breaking down basketball.
That's true. It's always a beautiful day in Maui, though, right? There's plenty of other opportunities to go to the beach.
Yeah, got to give a shout out to my guy Steven Rose here in the chat. What's up, Steven? Hope you are enjoying your day. Thank you for joining us again. We greatly appreciate it. We got a full show for you today. On today's show, we talk about some injury updates about Chris Middleton, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell. We make fun at Rudy Gobert and his B problem. We talk about the two games that happened last night, recapping the Bulls loss to the Bucks, the Nuggets loss to the Warriors. We talk about both of those teams and what we can expect from them this offseason. Then we give a preview of all three games that are happening today: Sixers, Raptors, Suns, Pelicans, Mavericks, Jazz. And then we finish the show, as always, with Q&A. You guys, the Barflies.
Yeah, another loaded day. It is starting to get a little bit lighter, though, right? Only one game on Friday all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's wild. And as you might know, I will be on the road on Friday, so Calvin will be running the show here in the studio. I'll be on my way to California tonight on the red eye. So fun times ahead. I'm going to a wedding this weekend. It's going to be a ton of fun. All right, Calvin, let's jump here into today's show. You want to give an update on Chris Middleton?
Yeah, very unfortunate news coming out of Milwaukee today. The Bucks are expecting and fearing that Chris Middleton will not be available at all for any game in this Eastern Conference semis series matchup with the Boston Celtics, still recovering from that grade 2 MCL sprain in his left knee.
Yeah, that's rough for them. Bucks fans were celebrating last night. I don't know if they're celebrating as much today. What's up, Mike? Good to see you here in the chat. Yeah, Mavs are looking great. We have some good news on Devin Booker, right?
Yeah, unlike Milwaukee, both Phoenix and Utah getting some good news today on the injury front. Devin Booker is expected to play in Game 6 tonight in New Orleans. Very, very surprising. Originally, the report was that he might be ready to go for Game 7. He's still going to be a game-time decision. They have to wait and see how he performs in warm-ups. If he feels good enough to play, though, he's going to play tonight.
Tricky situation here, right? You want him on the court, but at the same time, we know about the hamstring injuries and how long they can last. And also, further damage can be done. If they're going to make another run to make it to the finals this year, they need Devin Booker healthy. Yeah. Do you think they might be rushing him back a little bit here? They're facing an 8 seed that's like over 10 games under 500.
Well, I don't know. It's hard to make that determination. And, Mike, that's a Woj bomb, by the way. Woj reported that Booker would be ready to play tonight. It's easy to say if he comes out and re-aggravates the injury that they rushed him back, right?
Yeah.
But on the other side of the coin, you've got a Dallas-Utah series that could also potentially go 7 games. Mm-hmm. You're trying to get a little bit extra rest. You need to close it out on the road tonight. So there is an argument to be made to play him, obviously, right?
Yeah, and they are going to New Orleans to play. New Orleans has played really well at home. And, the last thing the Phoenix Suns want is a 7-game series in the first round here against the 8th seed Because we all know how 7-game series go, right? Anybody can win Game 7.
Yeah.
Right now, they have 2 games to close it out. They need to win one of these next 2 games to advance. So, interesting move by Phoenix. We'll see what happens. And you mentioned Donovan Mitchell. You want to give an update on him and then also kind of dive into this interesting Rudy Gobert situation?
Yeah, so real quickly, Donovan Mitchell is in the lineup tonight. He's going to play. He's dealing with 2 bruised quads and a hamstring injury that apparently doesn't exist anymore. It's now just the quads. But he is expected to go, and hopefully he's at 100% for Utah's sake, because I don't see how they pull this thing out without Donovan Mitchell playing like Donovan Mitchell. Rudy Gobert ends up on the injury report a bit of an interesting way. Apparently, he has a beehive at his house.
Yeah.
He was stung in the face by one of his bees today. I believe he got stung on the nose. There's some pictures floating around social media of him with a swollen face. And it's got all kinds of fun memes blowing up Instagram and Twitter right now. Utah needs to believe tonight in Game 6.
So weird. I don't even know if that's injury report,
I know, right?
Worthy.
It's just crazy.
But good news for Mike and his Dallas Mavericks. And he is such a weirdo. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know bees could fly that high, but interesting for them. We'll see what happens. And you think he's going to put some makeup on that, or he's just going to run around? Is he going to have like a mask on, or? I
think he's going to be, he's going to be just out there in the open, swollen face and all.
They got to do something. These guys have access to everything, right? There's got to be something that can try and eliminate some of the inflammation. But yeah, I think we're going to notice it tonight for sure, especially if he's on the free throw line, which we know he'll be on the free throw line.
He'll be on the free throw line.
And if I'm Dallas, I'm going to make sure this guy is shooting the most free throws on the Utah Jazz so that I can get this thing closed out and move on. All right, speaking of moving on, we're moving on here. Let's talk about last night. We had 2 games. I know this is a depressing one for you, Calvin. The Chicago Bulls are officially eliminated from playoff contention by the Milwaukee Bucks. No Zach LaVine. Still in the health and safety protocols. Unfortunate for him. There's also a report that he might be dealing with some knee injuries that's been lingering. Maybe he'll have surgery this offseason. In the next section here, we'll dive in a little bit deeper on what the Bulls need to do this offseason to come back strong next season. But officially, they lost this game 116-100 to the Milwaukee Bucks. 23 points from Patrick Williams, 19 from Vucevic, and 16 rebounds for him. 17 off the bench for Kobe White. But it was Giannis's night. 33 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists. He gets the win, and they move on.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really much to break down here. The Bulls were just missing too many pieces, right? Like, how can you don't stand a chance against the defending champs missing that many key pieces. And give credit to the Bucks, right? Like, they had a great game plan for this series. Chicago, percentage-wise, shot the three-point shot very well this year, but they attempted the fewest in the NBA. So the game plan was pack the paint, nothing inside, nothing easy for DeRozan, double-team him every time, and force Vucevic and these other guys to hit three-point shots, and the Bulls just could not do that. They had the lowest offensive efficiency of any team in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, they got a win here. And they got one win out of this whole series. That's the best you could ask for, given the circumstances, missing players, all this stuff. Still high on the Bulls going into next season. Like I said, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. I do want to give a shout-out to Bobby Portis. This guy has been surprising, and I know he's playing against his old team. 14 points, 17 rebounds for him. Just watching the highlights, it was like Bobby Portis, Bobby Portis, Bobby Portis.
He's done this all year for them. Stepped up huge for Milwaukee when Brook Lopez was out after having back surgery. He had arguably the best year of his career, and it's continuing in the postseason.
Yeah, many people in Chicago thought he might be the next Michael Jordan after he punched somebody in practice. That didn't, unfortunately, work out for him. He bounced around a little bit. I think he's found a good home here in Milwaukee, and he's definitely helping them move back to the playoffs. I also want to give a shout-out to Pat Connaughton, 20 points for him in this game, and Grayson Allen. This guy's almost come out of nowhere. He's playing Like, no one expected him to do this in the pros. 13 points for him, 5 rebounds, an assist, a steal. He was all over the court.
He's really stepped up. He had maybe the best games of his season, both regular and postseason, against Chicago. Of course, there's the ongoing joke now that the Bucks fans are booing him even at home when he comes in because he's embracing the villain role. They're going to need him to continue to give that production in the next round. I don't know if it's going to be doable. A lot more difficult of a task for him to score like that against the Boston Celtics than the Chicago Bulls. But without Chris Middleton, they're definitely going to need him to keep this up a little bit longer.
Yeah, and you mentioned the unfortunate news about Chris Middleton, but we had talked about earlier, Dante DiVincenzo, not that he's this amazing player that saves the Bucks or anything, but I thought he was a decent loss for them. This guy steps in, and Grayson Allen's been filling that need as kind of the scrappy guy that can make some buckets when needed. He's definitely impressed me so far, but like you said, it'll be interesting to see what he does moving into the next series against the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, whole nother world in Boston.
It is. And then he's going to be facing guys like Marcus Smart, Defensive Player of the Year, and what he can really do on the offensive and defensive end of the floor is going to be interesting to see.
Absolutely.
Anything else you want to mention in this game?
Better luck next year, Chicago. Thanks for the condolences, Mike.
All right. So they are officially going fishing. But next up, we have Denver went to Golden State to face the Warriors. This game was actually a really close game.
It was a great game to watch.
Denver was up the majority of this game, but then again, it's Golden State. They come back. Steph Curry hit a bunch of threes in this game. It's so, it just breaks your soul when Steph Curry makes these shots.
Yeah, just ask Jokic. You can see it on his face in the fourth quarter when he hits that wing three right over him. He actually hit 2 in a row over Jokic, but, man, he was so defeated after that shot went in.
Yeah.
That's what Steph Curry does to you.
It is. It really is. Jokic had an incredible game. We know he had a couple of 37-point games in this series. He followed up with another one, 30 points, 19 rebounds, 8 assists, a steal, 2 blocks. I don't really like the turnover numbers here, 6 turnovers, but the dude is doing everything for the Denver Nuggets, missing their second and third best player. Aaron Gordon puts in 15 points, 14 for Will Barton, 14 for Morris, and then 19 huge points by DeMarcus Cousins off the bench, playing against his old team, but it just wasn't enough. This Golden State Warriors team is looking like what we mentioned last episode. They are a title favorite here in the West. Draymond Green hit a 3 in this game. When he's hitting threes, the Warriors are definitely hard to stop. 11 points for him, 12 for Wiggins in this game, 30 points for Curry, 15 for Thompson, and 15 big points off the bench by Gary Payton II. Incredible performance by the Warriors. Incredible performance by the Denver Nuggets. Just an exciting game to watch for fans. But the Warriors close out the season 4-1, and they advance to the next round.
Hey, yeah, absolutely. Steph was big. Jokic was big. But teams that win in the postseason, they get timely performances from people you don't expect, right? You have to have some of those at some point if you're going to make a finals run. Gary Payton II gave the Warriors that timely performance last night with a bunch of really big threes there in the second half. And ultimately, that's what it takes for the Warriors to move on here. And you heard Steph after the game saying, it's been a while since we had to close a team out before. We forgot what that was like.
Yeah.
That is another thing that should be very worrisome if you're the other teams in the Western Conference. The fact that the Warriors still maybe haven't found their stride yet, but they're looking like the favorites to win the NBA title.
First playoff series win at the new Chase Center. This is what Golden State Warriors fans have been waiting for. And then, like you mentioned, players that you don't really expect to step up for this team. And for me, that's just what happens when you have a good franchise with a good system, good coaching staff. You put guys in a position to succeed. Everybody that's in the NBA has been the best player on their team at one point in their life, if not multiple teams. These guys are all capable of doing things. They're in the league for a reason. They're either a specialist or an all-around good player. Golden State does exactly that. They put these guys in a position to succeed, and it helps when you have guys like Draymond Green, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson on the court, because the attention is kind of drawn away from these guys, and it almost feels like there's no pressure on the role players of the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, it kind of does feel that way.
It's pretty incredible. I mean, outside of Steph Curry, who's been the most impressive player for you on the Warriors team, this playoff run?
Man, that's tough. I mean, I think you could easily pick Draymond here. He's never going to stand out in terms of scoring, but like we talked about before, just how important he is to this team in every other aspect of the game. And some stuff you can't even find in the stat sheet. Just his ability to get Steph and Klay open for shots, whether it's off the dribble or dribble handoff, something like that, screens, his defensive intent. Jokic had a great series, don't get me wrong.
Great season.
Draymond Green, who's given up a ton of size, just continued to body him inside all series long. I think that's a very underrated thing here. And my other pick would be Klay Thompson, because you really didn't know what this guy was going to look like in his first playoff series in 3 years. He had some great games down the stretch of the regular season, but would it be the same in a playoff intensity type atmosphere? Mm-hmm. And he's looked, every bit as good as he used to be offensively for sure.
Yeah, early on in this series, I would have taken Jordan Poole, but he's, cooled off a little bit here with the return of Steph Curry. Maybe that's just the fact that they haven't needed him to do all this stuff because Steph is available. He's back in the starting lineup. But it's hard to choose because this team just has so many young, talented players that are ready to back up these veterans that already have championship rings. And, I would not be surprised if they find themselves back in the NBA Finals.
Only time will tell.
Only time will tell. All right, let's talk a little bit more here about the Nuggets. For a team that lost 4-1, they were very competitive in this series, right? Especially this last game. We see elimination games where sometimes teams just kind of, just lay down and lose. We saw an altercation early on in this series between some of their bench players. We also saw that with the Miami Heat finishing out the season. Sometimes this propels teams. Sometimes it kills teams. I want to know the difference or your thoughts on the difference between the scuffle on the Heat bench, the scuffle on the Nuggets bench, and why they're a little different.
Well, I'm not so sure how different they really are, but the only differences that I can really see between those two instances is the Miami scuffle was between the leaders of that team, Jimmy Butler and Eric Spoelstra. The Nuggets scuffle, DeMarcus Cousins, in my opinion, is not a leader at all.
Yeah.
Because you got to lead by example, and he leads by example with his play on the court.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do it any other way.
Not a great example off the court.
Not a great example. So that's the only difference I can see between the two. And I'm not saying that's the reason why Denver lost this series and Miami went on to win their first round series, because I don't think that's true at all. But I do think there is something to be said when your best player and your team leader is the guy in the middle of that, as opposed to, a role player, basically, is what I'm saying here.
Yeah, I think it's more of, as you mentioned, best player, coach getting into it. They both have the same goal, right? And that's improving this team, getting them to where they should be. And there's either a miscommunication or they're like, hey, we're not here right now, and this is where we need to go to. What can we do to get there? Maybe they have a difference of opinion, but they're both fighting for the same thing, and that's to improve their team. Versus this scuffle on the Nuggets bench, don't get me wrong, the Nuggets want to win games. They do.
Of course.
But for me, it was more of just like a frustration with each other. It was, you guys are not playing like me, and I need you to play like me. Or I did this, you were supposed to do this, you didn't do that. It wasn't the big picture. It was more of like an emotional, in the moment frustration instead of this is a defining moment of our season and of our team, and we need to do this if we're going to get to where we want to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think timing is a big factor in both of these instances too, right?
Yep.
Like Miami's scuffle happens towards the tail end of the regular season, and it helps get them on track for where they need to be in the postseason.
Yep.
Denver's bench scuffle comes in the middle of the first round series when they're getting blown out, and they're wondering how the hell do we fix this problem? You know, it's too little, too late at that point.
Exactly. And I thought you had a good point here. Just because we're talking about these scuffles and the differences does not mean the Nuggets were going to win this series or lose this series based on this scuffle. You know, we did talk about how the Heat scuffle helped the team move forward. And yeah, I think it's you hit it right on the head there. It's because the leaders were fighting over how to make this team better instead of frustration with each other. So some good points there, I think, Calvin. All right, so let's talk about fishing. I like fishing. I know you like fishing.
Yeah, who doesn't like fishing?
I know Paul George likes fishing.
He loves fishing.
And he's fishing already, so that's good for him.
He's been fishing.
He's been fishing. Ben Simmons is fishing.
He is.
Now we have two more teams that are now fishing. Chicago Bulls and the Denver Nuggets.
Yep.
Let's dive here a little deeper into the Chicago Bulls. You know, I know as a Bulls fan, Calvin, you are emotionally invested in the team, in the season. You want them to do well. Let's dive here into the roster and talk about how they can get better next season. If I were to mention any team in the NBA about turning it around, Chicago Bulls is the top of my list, right? Missed the playoffs last season. We're not looking too good. They had a guy in Zach LaVine. They traded for a center. But all the moves they made this offseason really propelled them into this season. They had the best record in the East at one point this year.
For a while.
And unfortunately, injuries happen. You know, they did not get matched up very well for them in the playoffs and unfortunately lose in the first round. But they have another offseason here to build and get them back to where they actually want to be. And that's probably in the NBA Finals and winning an NBA championship. It's been a while since that's happened for them. So looking here at the roster, you know, you have DeMar DeRozan. He was your big signing last offseason. He's got 2 more years under contract with them. You got Vucevic, 1 more year. Zach LaVine, question marks here. They were not able to work out an extension. You mentioned he's potentially getting knee surgery this offseason. He's going to be a highly coveted guy on the free agent market, so Chicago's going to have to pay him. They brought in Lonzo Ball. He's been dealing with injuries. He's still under contract for 3 more years. They got to figure out what they're doing with Derek Jones. His rookie contract is over. They brought in Alex Caruso. He's locked in for 3 more years. Patrick Williams has got 2 more years. Kobe White's got another year. And then, you know, they also have the 18th pick in this year's draft. So, Calvin, I want to hear from you. What do the Chicago Bulls need to do this offseason to come back stronger next year?
Well, it's pretty easy for me. They need to get healthy. I mean, I think that if you have this same group together for a full season, you know, the sky is potentially the limit here. Zach LaVine, like you mentioned, is the big question mark because he's an unrestricted free agent. He's going to probably have off-season knee surgery. So what does that factor into their decision-making on how much to pay him? Do they offer him a max contract? All of that stuff. I expect that they still will do that. I think seeing how good this team was for a very short period of time this year together is enough of optimistic reason to say let's run it back next year and see if we can just get this team to be fully healthy. I mean, even guys like Patrick Williams, for example, who had a great game last night, he only played 17 games during the regular season. Mm-hmm. So this Bulls team was completely decimated all season long. I think that their first priority is let's just get everybody back to training camp healthy and go from there.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, this will be their second official season if they're able to bring all these guys back, all playing together, building chemistry, getting on the same page with the coaching staff. There's been times this season, a lot of times, where they looked fantastic. They looked like the best team in the Eastern Conference. You know, part of that is what they did. Part of that is, some of these other teams were dealing with injuries as well. Brooklyn, we know what happened with them and all those drama, stuff like that. But I agree with you. Zach LaVine, number one, he needs to come back. They need to get healthy. I think they need to add a little bit more talent. Maybe some more bench depth will help them survive some of these injuries, because injuries are part of the season. As far as the draft goes, any thoughts on what to do with this draft pick?
I'd have to look a little bit further into that. I haven't quite made that determination, or that gotten through that process yet. They're a pretty balanced team. I mean, yeah, you mentioned bench depth, but everybody's bench depth looks bad when you have to play bench players as starters for the majority of the season, right?
Yeah.
So their first and pretty much their only priority this offseason is health, I would say.
I'm just looking here at a mock draft. They're projected 18, Walker Kessler, center out of Auburn. Any thoughts on him? Do you know him? I have no idea who this is.
Yeah, I mean, he's a solid interior rim protector, played for an Auburn team that was a pretty good defensive team all year long. They struggled, mightily scoring the basketball through parts of the season. But I could definitely see the Bulls going for some more depth at the center position. They ask a lot of Vucevic. He's another guy that took a lot of bumps and bruises over the course of the regular season. They lost Daniel Gafford last year, who we saw start a bunch of games for the Washington Wizards this year. So depth at the center position is definitely a realistic possibility for them.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the stats here. He's 7'1", averaged 16 and 11 on the season, an amazing 6.4 blocks per game, and 1.5 steals. I think he could definitely help them inside for sure. I love Vucevic a lot, but Vucevic is not the rim protector that this guy appears to be. So
no, not even close.
It could definitely help them. Anything else you want to mention about the Bulls before we move on here?
No, just excuse me. Just they got an exciting offseason ahead of them, and Flame. They don't have a lot of cap space, but if you're willing to pay the luxury tax for a win now team, we've definitely seen teams do that in the past. So it's all a question of how much money do they want to spend.
Yeah, and they do have the bird rights to Zach LaVine, so they can go over the salary cap to bring him back. So no worries there. We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be right back. Nuggets. I also got to highlight Mike Monticello's comment here in the chat. Ben Simmons said his back is too sore to fish. That's hilarious. We'll see. Depends on how stressed he is, right? All right, so as far as the Denver Nuggets go, high hopes for them this season, high hopes for them last season. I think they do have the MVP on their roster. They've dealt with a ton of injuries. Unfortunately, they match up with a Golden State Warriors team that was getting healthy at the right time. They lose in the first round 4-1. Jokic plays incredible, but he doesn't really get much help. So I want to look at this roster. I want to break down, some of these players, some of these contracts, and let's talk about what they can do to improve this offseason to get back where they want to be. First off, Jamal Murray. He's only 25. He missed the entire season due to injury. He's locked up for 3 more years. He's under contract next year for almost $34 million. Jokic is under contract for 1 more year at $32 million. I know he's eligible for a Supermax contract extension. He said he will sign that extension. We have not heard anything from the Nuggets yet, but I think it's a foregone conclusion at this point that they should offer him that deal. He's only 27. He could be winning his second MVP award in 2 seasons. And he's been huge for them. He does everything for that team. Next up, Aaron Gordon. He's under contract for 4 more years, $19.6 million next season. He's still only 26, which is amazing because we've seen him in the dunk contest. It feels like he's been in the league for 10 years already. Will Barton is under contract. The last year of his contract, $16 million. Monte Morris, $9 million, and he's got 2 years left. JaMychal Green's got a year left, $8 million. And then Michael Porter Jr., who missed the second half of this season due to a back injury, back surgery. He's only 23 years old, but he just signed a huge contract extension, which starts next season. First year of that deal is $29.7 million. It's a 5-year deal, so they are going to have him under contract for a while. Jeff Green's got a player option at $4.5 million. And after that, that's pretty much the entire salary cap plus for me. Yeah. They do have a draft pick this offseason, pick number 21. Calvin, what are your thoughts on this team and how they move forward this offseason, how they improve and get back to the Western Conference Finals and potentially compete for a championship, because we know that's what all the Denver Nuggets fans and the players want. Yeah, well, a lot like Chicago, they need to get healthy, right? I mean, Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. combined to play 9 games this season. Wow. That's for 2 guys that are going to be making over $60 million between the 2 of them next season. Mm-hmm. They need them on the court, for sure. I think they need to look at bench depth as well. Jeff Green has been a great player in this league for a long time. How much more does he have left in the tank? JaMychal Green, I think you can say the same thing. That I think they like him as a player. Bones Highland has definitely been a good surprise for them this season. So they've got a lot of really good pieces. I think, again, they just need to get healthy and try to run this thing back. Yeah. Jokic took this team to the playoffs by himself, basically, this year. You add Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. into that, that's a dangerous team. Yeah, I agree with you. And, depending on what the front office and management want to do with this roster, they really have no choice but to run it back next season, right? I don't know who's going to trade for Michael Porter Jr. And don't get me wrong, I love Michael Porter Jr. I've been watching him since high school. I'm very, very high on Michael Porter Jr., but he just continues to have these back injuries. He's still only 23 years old, but, 5 more years on this contract, making $29 million, $32 million, $34 million, $36 million, $39 million. They're stuck with him for better or worse. Jamal Murray, amazing player, missed the entire season. He's still only 25 years old. He absolutely killed it in the playoffs for them last season and all last season. I think you're going to keep him. You're going to keep Jokic, obviously. What do you do with Aaron Gordon? Is he the real answer for you at the 4 position? But the 3 main guys in Murray, Jokic, and Porter, you're going to run it back with them. You're right. They need to get healthy. Maybe they need to try and, add some more bench depth, like we said. Same with Chicago. DeMarcus Cousins has played well for them.
Yeah, that was a good sign.
He's only making, $700,000 this season. It'll be interesting to see what he demands or wants this next season. He's burned some bridges with some players, some coaches, and some teams in this league. I know he has a great relationship with Michael Malone after what they did together in Sacramento, but he's getting a little older too. He's 31 years old. Yeah. He's dealt with a ton of different injuries. For a big man, injuries, especially leg injuries, stuff like that, can spell doom. He hasn't looked like they've really affected him much in the limited time he has played for them. But does he come back for this team? We're not quite sure. What do they do with the draft pick? Who's all going to be available? But I see this team being quite similar next season.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. And part of that is, like you just went over with the salary cap, they don't have a lot of flexibility here, especially if they're going to offer Jokic that Supermax contract, which we all kind of feel like they will do or they should do. So yeah, they're kind of stuck at this point. They're relying on these young guys to come back healthy and ready to play next season.
Do you think there's any chance the Nuggets don't offer Jokic the extension?
I think there's a very little chance they don't, but the Michael Porter Jr. contract is what I'm worried about if I'm Denver. From a financial standpoint, obviously you want to keep Jokic. You know you have to pay him.
He's your star player.
But that Michael Porter Jr. contract is going to be a huge liability for them if he's not ready to start next season. So I don't think there's a big chance that they don't offer him this extension. But from a front office standpoint, you got to be a little nervous.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they offer him the contract 12 times out of 10. I think this just, in today's NBA, you got to do it, because if you don't pay him, somebody else is going to.
You can't let him get away, that's for sure.
Yeah, and then what do? You're stuck with Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray, who...
I mean, there's already rumors about Jokic to Dallas, so he can team up with Luka and all that stuff. Denver needs to nip that in the bud right away.
Oh, yeah. That would be an amazing lineup. It really would be.
Pretty fun.
What's up, Key Kings? Good to see you here. Thank you for joining us. If you're Denver, I mean, talking about this contract extension issue, like, do you have any concerns with Jokic? Because for me, it's like, no shade on Jokic. Amazing player. Like, he deserves everything he's done so far in the league. Like, no shade at all. They chose him over Nurkic. They end up trading Nurkic. He doesn't have a typical basketball body, right? He's a big guy. He plays incredible. He hasn't really had many injuries either, which is strange. But do you have any concerns about his durability as he starts to get older? We haven't heard the things about him like we heard about James Harden, doesn't take care of his body, stuff like this. But if you look at Jokic, he doesn't look like he's in the best shape of his life, right?
No, he doesn't look like that, but I'm not worried about him from a physical standpoint. I mean, he doesn't play above the rim. He's a very smooth and, kind of like Luka in a way. These guys, they don't really put themselves in high injury risk situations very often on a basketball court. And he's huge. Like, the only thing that you worry about is other guys, constantly hacking him and whacking him, and over time, how do those hits add up, or do they take a toll? But the guy he's the best big man in the game. I mean, him and Embiid for me are 1 and 2, maybe even 1A, 1B. He's a truly, truly special player. He's so special of a player that you pay him the max contract, even though he is a defensive liability. Like, that's just how good he is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm paying him. The dude is amazing. And you mentioned other players, beating on him. We saw one of the Morris twins try and do that this season. Didn't work out very well for him.
Did not work out very well.
He runs up to him and tries to hit him, bounces off of him.
Yeah.
Jokic is just a huge human being. And it's amazing all the things he can do on the basketball court and with the basketball at his size. It's just truly incredible. I'm paying him. I'm not having any concerns. You know, you mentioned Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, both out due to injuries this season. I have a lot more concerns about those two guys than I do Jokic.
Definitely.
And if you're a team, you got to choose at least one guy, your franchise player, and run with him. There's a lot of worse franchise players in the league than Jokic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a bad way at all. I'm just saying I'm sticking with this guy, and I'm going as far as he takes us.
100%.
And this season he took us to the playoffs with nobody
By
else,
himself.
really. Yeah, which is
the
shout out to him.
Numbers speak for themselves.
Shout out to him. All right, Calvin, let's move on here. We have 3 games today, which is one more game than we had yesterday, so it's exciting.
3
more
game
basketball
sixes today.
And you know, they still don't listen to me about staggering these games, so I'm going to have to try and watch 2 games at the same time. But that's okay. So first off, Philadelphia goes to Toronto. No Matisse Thybulle in this game due to the vaccination status. Philadelphia is up 3-2. James Harden has not played too well in this series. I think he's averaged like 18 points a game on like 30-something% shooting.
37%. 9 assists a game.
Embiid is dealing with the ligament injury in the thumb. What are your thoughts on this game?
That seat's getting awfully hot in Philadelphia. I'm very worried if I'm the Philadelphia 76ers going into Toronto for this Game 6. I think Toronto wins this game and forces a Game 7. The only way that they don't is if James Harden comes out and plays, has a really, really strong game. He's got to be more efficient. He's got to try to get to the free throw line, get himself going, and he's got to shoot better. He has to be able to stretch the floor. The Embiid injury really worries me. I think it's announced that he's probably going to have off-season surgery on that thumb. I think every game that he plays, it might get a little bit worse for him. So that just means there's more emphasis and more pressure on James Harden to have a good game. And Toronto is really clicking right now. Getting Scotty Barnes back, even though they lost Van Vliet, Siakam has played really, really well. OG Anunoby, and Anunoby has played really, really well in the series as well. And I think this is going to a Game 7, which would be wild to think about. Only 3 times in NBA history has a team forced a Game 7 down 3-0. I think we're looking at number 4 right here.
Yeah, and you already know that Doc Rivers is flustered, right? You saw his press conference yesterday about everyone needs to look at the full story about why my record looks like this. And so he seems a little worried. You mentioned Fred VanVleet's out in this game, but Scotty Barnes was able to come back, and they're playing incredibly well. I agree with you, Calvin. I think that either Tyrese Maxey or James Harden needs to have a huge game. Embiid was playing incredible at the start of this series. The thumb injury is obviously bothering him. Like, his stats have dramatically declined since the injury. He says, you know, it's okay. I'm going to keep playing.
Yeah, I mean, no
but it's
excuses.
painful.
He's saying all the right things.
Yeah, it's painful for him. Each time he touches the ball, you can tell he's just a little bit different of a guy. And you're right, going to a hostile environment like Toronto, we talk about home court advantage, and it's funny, Doc Rivers has actually mentioned, we were in the bubble for one of these times, so there wasn't a home court advantage. We didn't get our Game 6 or whatever in L.A. and blah, 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 our Game 7 in L.A. So they're going to Toronto here. Toronto's got something to prove, and they're playing with house money right now.
They've got all the momentum right now, all of it.
I am also worried for the Philadelphia 76ers, but at the same time, they traded for James Harden for a reason, and they traded for him to not get knocked out in the first round or the second round to get past that.
Like this.
So I could see James Harden having a huge game here. At the same time, I could see him throwing up another dud and them losing this game and it going to a Game 7. The question I have for you, and real quick, I want to just break down, Philadelphia is only favored by 1.5 in this game.
All these games today are basically pick-em games.
And ESPN's predicting a 53.4% chance of them winning. That's basically a coin toss.
Yeah.
Which is wild. The question I have for you, Calvin, if Philadelphia loses this series, was the process worth it? Because, you know, I'm just looking back at all the draft picks that they had in this process. Michael Carter-Williams won Rookie of the Year. They trade him. They trade up. They could have taken Jason Tatum. They trade up to take a guy that forgot how to shoot the basketball, and they end up trading him away to Orlando for basically nothing.
Yeah.
Maybe a late first-round pick. It seems like they've just constantly moved guys in and out of the roster. Yes, they were able to trade for Tobias Harris. They traded for Jimmy Butler, then they lost him. So what are your thoughts on the process and what this, if they do lose this series, what this means for this team?
Well, I don't know if you judge the process based on this series alone, first of all. But in my mind, the process was absolutely worth it for one reason. Joel Embiid. I mean, this dude is, of course, he had injury concerns early on in his career. He seems to have found a way to fight through that. He's been available for them, played at an MVP-type level for the past 2 seasons now. And he's a generational big man. Like, he's one of the most dominant big men in the game today. Maybe one of the most dominant big men in the game in the last 5 to 10 years. So the fact that they've got him, also you have to think, they're just a few years removed from being one crazy Kawhi Leonard shot away from an Eastern Conference Finals. Not saying that they would have won the East that year and gone to the NBA Finals, but who knows?
I didn't even mention number 1 overall pick Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
Who they traded away for James Harden. And they traded away Seth Curry, some draft picks, Drummond, to bring in a guy that's not playing the greatest basketball of his career.
Yeah. No, we didn't even talk about Jimmy Butler. Like, there's a ton of
Jahlil
roster
Okafor
moves that they've made over the past 5-6 years that were questionable at the time. But I think when it is all said and done, Joel Embiid was worth every loss that it took for them to get to work their way through the process.
Yeah, I mean, if they lose this game and they force a Game 7, I think that's a victory for all NBA fans, other than Sixers fans, because it'll be exciting to see what happens at a Game 7 in Philadelphia. Maybe the Sixers fans will regret turning on Ben Simmons and, basically forcing him out of town.
You're speaking too highly of Philadelphia fans. They will not ever go back on that.
But if they do lose this series, I'll be excited to talk about moves that they need to make this offseason, because this, to me, this roster has one of the biggest question marks around it for me, especially if they lose this series.
Absolutely.
All right, moving on here to the second game of the day, another potential elimination game. All 3 of these games today are elimination games. All 3 teams are up 3-2. Let's talk about Phoenix in New Orleans. You mentioned Devin Booker's a game-time decision in this game. Could potentially play here.
Likely that he plays tonight. We don't know how many minutes he'll play, but likely that he does play.
It is in New Orleans. Phoenix is favored by 3. Just looking here at the injury report, it looks empty to me. So we might get to see a full-force Phoenix team and a full-force New Orleans team. What do you think happens in this game?
Well, I think Phoenix wins this game. Everybody's going to point to Devin Booker being back as, Phoenix is, finally going to get some scoring back, right?
Yep.
But I look at, yes, obviously that's important. I think Devin Booker helps this team out in another way, though. We've seen Chris Paul have a rough go at times in this series with my man Lil Sweet, GTA. Devin Booker actually gives them another guy that can bring the ball up the court consistently in those situations when the press is on. Takes a little bit of pressure off of Chris Paul. Chris Paul is also dealing with a hand injury, his left hand.
Yep.
So I think that's underrated here in this Devin Booker situation coming back to this team. And I think that Phoenix is able to pull this game out on the road. It's going to be a close one, I believe, but I like Phoenix to win. I think Mikal Bridges is coming off his best game, obviously, of the postseason. You get Devin Booker back, that means he's going to get some good looks again from the field. So I like Phoenix in this game to close it out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that Booker takes the pressure off Chris Paul. Don't get me wrong, Chris Paul is still going to be under some pressure in this game because if they lose this series, this has been a consistent thing with him, right? Is either he's injured or someone on his team is injured and his team falls short of expectations. Dude's still looking for his first ring. They fell short last year in the finals.
Yep.
If Devin Booker can play tonight, I don't even really care what he can do on the court. If he can play a decent amount of minutes, not re-aggravate the injury, I think it is huge for the Phoenix Suns.
Definitely.
And if they plan on making it to the finals, they got to start closing out some of these games.
Yeah.
They really do. And, you think about a guy like Chris Paul, head of the PA, has been a great player in the NBA, probably one of the best leaders in the NBA during his career. I think he is letting his team know how important this game is for them and for their season. And I expect him to have a huge game. I expect DeAndre Ayton to have a huge game. And I agree with you. I think Phoenix takes this game and the series. However, if they don't, I'm excited for another Game 7. So
who doesn't love a Game 7?
Haven't seen one yet.
Yeah.
Best 2 words in sports, right?
Right.
Game 7. But yeah, I agree with you. I have Phoenix winning this game as well and advancing to the second round.
Did you have a pick for Toronto to Philadelphia today?
Ooh, I have not picked yet. Let me come back to that. All right, third game of the day. Dallas goes to Utah to play Rudy Gobert and his Bees team.
The Beekeepers.
They currently lead the series 3-2. Luka Doncic is back and looking every bit of himself. This is even, right? Straight coin toss on this game. It is in Utah. It'll be interesting to see. Donovan Mitchell is banged up. Rudy Gobert, I have no idea how a bee sting on your face affects your game. But it's going to be an interesting game.
He's not a shooter, so
yeah. It's going to be an interesting game. It's more basketball for us to watch here. And what are your thoughts on this?
Give me Dallas in this game. I'm done trusting the Utah Jazz. Haven't believed in them for a while now. I think that Dallas's game plan, their defense has been too good in this series. It has been a close series overall, but I'm worried about how healthy Donovan Mitchell is, and he is everything for this team right now. He's one of the only reasons that they're even in this series. So if he's at all limited, it's got to be Dallas for me.
Yeah, I think this could potentially end up being a blowout and not something the Utah Jazz fans want to see. Ivan's got a good question here. Is this the final game for Quinn Snyder as Utah's coach?
I've been saying it for a couple weeks now. I think this is the end of the Utah Jazz as we know it. So that probably means that Quinn Snyder will be out as well.
They'll be making some big moves this offseason, and, I'll be excited to talk about what they need to do to improve because just like, the Sixers, there's some question marks surrounding this team too. They're paying a ton of money to a guy in Rudy Gobert who is so limited. We've heard about the issues between him and Donovan Mitchell. We also saw times in this series where they seemed to be on the same page, and we saw Rudy Gobert game-winning dunk. So interesting to see. I agree with you. I got Dallas winning this game, and I'm going to say Philadelphia wins as well. I'm taking all three road teams today.
All three road teams.
Yep. I think it's going to be a good day of basketball. I really do.
So no Game 7s for you then?
Unfortunately, no. At least not as far as these series go. But we'll see what happens. I think Philadelphia's got to do something. If they don't win the game today, it's going to be hell for them.
Yeah.
So I think they got all the pressure, and I think they'll figure out a way to come through. But I do have a lot of concerns as well. And, at the same time, I think that Toronto has a chance to win that game. I think New Orleans has a chance to win their game as well. The only team that I feel has no chance is Utah. And you know what that means? That means they're probably going to win the game.
Probably going to win, yeah.
So no offense, Mike. I'm still picking Dallas. Anything else you want to talk about in these three games?
No, I think, we'll let it play out here.
Okay.
See how many Game 7s, if any, that we get.
Which game are you most excited for?
Probably the Dallas-Utah game.
Yeah.
That series has been a really entertaining series, even though it hasn't been the highest scoring series, but it's getting a lot more physical. You know, we saw Luka Doncic get into it with Hassan Whiteside in game 4 or 5, and two fairly evenly matched teams when they're at full strength. So I think that's the most exciting game. But I do really like the Phoenix-New Orleans game as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the Dallas game will be very exciting. It'll probably be the closest game, maybe. We'll see, depending on how
I think all of these games, all three of these games are going to be close today.
But for me, I'm picking Suns, Pelicans, because I got to see my guy Jose GTA out there. I want to see how many 8 seconds violations he can get on Chris Paul. And I'm just curious as to whether Devin Booker can play, and what we're going to see out of him.
What is he going to look like?
Really hope for the Phoenix
question mark.
Suns that he does not re-aggravate this injury. We saw, who was it that returned? Clint Capella.
Yeah.
Tried to give it a go because it was an elimination game. Could only go as far as his body would take him. Had to come out of the game. His team loses. It's not game 7 yet for Phoenix. They can afford to lose this game, just like the Sixers can afford to lose this game, and the Dallas Mavericks can afford to lose this game. But it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
All right. I think we made it through everything, Calvin. Man, I want to go fishing. I really do. All right, let's open it up to Q&A before we close out the show. I also want to remind you guys that Calvin and I will be doing a live at Royal Rebounds in about an hour as well. So if you have any Kings questions, just hold them back here in the chat, because we're going to do a full Royal Rebound stream with all your Kings questions. We're going to talk about the coaching search. We're going to talk about some comments by James Ham. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But if you guys have any other questions regarding any team but the Sacramento Kings, don't worry. I love the Kings. I love answering questions. But anybody else, let us know here in the chat, and we'd be happy to answer them. Man, Jose GTA, dude. I hope the Kings try and get this guy. I love guys like that. I do. It's like the underdog that you love to root for.
Yeah.
He's always smiling on the court, which I love too. I know people have got hate in the past of like, you smile too much. And that's funny. Watching Winning Time, that was Jerry West's excuse of why he didn't want to draft Magic Johnson in the show, because apparently it's not real. He said, you didn't want to draft me. And he's like, yeah, you smile too much. You're having too much fun out there. That doesn't translate to winning. I lost this many finals, and now I'm angry. I got 1 ring, but I still have the nightmares at night and all this.
Yeah.
I don't really go for that logic. I love guys that want to have fun. It's basketball. It's a game. There's a reason you do it. I feel like it's the same for any career, right? Is you're going to be your best when you enjoy what you're doing. And I think a smile shows that. We even saw Jordan smiling when he was playing too, with his tongue out.
Yeah. I don't know how many times you saw Jordan smile in a playoff series until they won, but.
All right, Flame Flurry wants to know, does Utah go into rebuilding mode if they get eliminated today?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately I think they do. I think they fire their coach. They're going to have to make a decision between Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert.
And we could see both of those guys move
potentially, too. Yeah. Like they could have complete turnover on this roster going into next season.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting situation for them, because it's like, if I could choose between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, that's an easy choice for me. I'm taking Donovan Mitchell every single time. But is Donovan Mitchell happy there? And if he's not happy and he wants to move on, am I building this team around Rudy Gobert? I don't think so. He doesn't seem like that kind of guy to me. He's so limited. I think he's a great player, but I think they overpaid him, and he's definitely strapping the team. And, maybe, Donovan Mitchell doesn't want to stay around for a rebuild either. Maybe he wants to go to a team like the Lakers for maybe a Russell Westbrook and a bunch of picks and some other stuff.
Wow, that
Who
would
knows?
be crazy.
But Utah Jazz are in trouble. They really are. They really are.
I think the writing's on the wall.
All right, Key Kings, what do the Chicago Bulls do this offseason to upgrade their roster? They weren't fully healthy this season, so we've yet to see their full potential. We had a whole section earlier on the show talking about this, but Calvin is a Bulls fan, so let's do it again, Cal.
Well, yeah, I mean, first and foremost, they got to get healthy, right? Like, this team, when healthy, was one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference, in a loaded Eastern Conference. They were the number 1 seed for a good portion of this season. So I think they definitely want to bring the band back for another season. But yeah, they have to get healthy, and Zach LaVine is going to be their biggest off-season issue. You know, re-signing him, he's going to have knee surgery.
Yeah, it's the same knee, right?
Yeah. Are they going to pay him a max contract? If they don't offer him a max contract, will he go somewhere else to take more money? So that's going to be a big deal for Chicago. But I think in terms of upgrading the roster, I like this roster overall. They just need guys on the court.
Yeah.
I mean, we mentioned it's not just the stars that missed a ton of games this year. It was a lot of their role players too. Patrick Williams, only 17 games this year. And, I do think that some of their young players got some really, really good experience. I'm looking at Ayo Dosunmu for one. This is a guy who was a second-round pick last year, really wasn't expected to do much on this team, but ended up having to play big-time minutes. In fact, started a ton of games because they were just depleted, whether it was COVID or injuries, and he really impressed me. He did not play well in this playoff series against the Bucks, but again, I think he got a lot of really good experience, and he really showed me a thing or two. So bench depth, maybe adding some more frontline players, a backup center, something like that in the draft or free agency. But overall, if you're able to re-sign Zach LaVine and everybody comes back fully healthy to start next season, I think Chicago likes the position that they're in.
Yeah, I agree. I think Zach LaVine's number 1 priority. I think you got to give him a max contract. And I don't know why they didn't work out an extension already. I'm not really sure. But I think...
Well, they did commit a lot of money this offseason elsewhere.
Yeah, that's true.
DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso. That was a lot of money they paid out.
But I do think Zach LaVine wants to be on this team. I think he likes playing on this team with these players. Unfortunate end to his season due to the knee and due to COVID protocols. I'm a little concerned about the knee injury just based on the fact that it's the same knee that he's had, and I feel like his game, yes, he's become an amazing three-point shooter, but his game is predicated on his athletic ability. And, modern medicine has gotten a lot better. We've seen guys come back from these injuries and be the exact same person, but it's still, I'm a little worried about that. I think I agree with Calvin. The team needs to get healthy. They need to bring the band back together. I also, not a lot, but I have a little bit of concern about DeMar DeRozan, and that's just based on the fact that he's getting older. He's 32 already. He had the best season of his career this season, the best season. He's been relatively healthy for his entire career, 76 games played this season, which is amazing. But guys get older. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, how much longer can he play at that type of a level?
Yeah, next season. Sure. But I think for the Bulls to make a championship run, they need DeMar DeRozan to have an incredible year next year. And I honestly think he will. I just don't know how many more years he can continue to do that.
Right.
But a great team, high upside. I'm really high on the Bulls. I've been saying it all season long. I think that they were ahead of schedule, maybe a year early. But I would watch out for Chicago next year.
Yeah,
I really would.
I agree.
Do you think the Suns re-sign DeAndre Ayton? If not, where do you think he will go? That's a tricky one, Calvin.
It's a very tricky one. Should they re-sign him? Yeah, I think they should. Will they? I'm not sure. And then in terms of where he would go, if the Suns aren't able to bring him back, that is a really tough question to answer, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I'm just
There's obviously going to be a long list of teams that want DeAndre Ayton if he's available.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up his stats here. I'm just going to throw it out here. I was not the biggest DeAndre Ayton fan coming out of the draft. I thought that Luka Doncic should have been the number 1 pick. I think I was right there, but DeAndre Ayton has been a very, very productive NBA player. They made it to the finals last season. I don't think they would have done that without him. But at the same time, he's had some injury concerns. His second year in the league, he only played 38 games. He only played 58 games this season. Incredible player. Averaged 17 and 10. Every team in the NBA wants a guy like that. It's just finding a balance of, how much is he worth versus his production. It's unfortunate that they weren't able to work out a contract extension, and we've seen that create drama for teams in the past as far as like having issues re-signing him. He is a restricted free agent, so they can match any contract offer that he gets. And, maybe if you're Phoenix, you say, okay, Ayton, we like you a lot. There's a reason we drafted you number 1 overall. We're just not sure exactly what your value is. So you go out, talk to a bunch of other teams, see what you're worth, and we'll match it. I don't know if that's going to impact him mentally or, make him feel like, hey, I'm not the priority. I'm not a part of this team. I think if they lose this first round series, that definitely complicates things. But I think they should re-sign him. If I'm Phoenix, I'm giving him a max contract because I'm really already locked in here. I got Chris Paul. I got Devin Booker. It takes 3 pretty much to win in this league. And I think you got to take a guy that you just spent the number 1 overall pick on and who has been a really productive player.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out because Robert Sarver, who's the Phoenix Suns owner, traditionally does not like to spend a ton of money.
Yep.
So will he be willing to unload, the dump truck, so to speak, for DeAndre Ayton?
Yeah, if they make it to the finals and they win the championship like I predicted, no questions asked. He's getting a max deal. But like I said, if they lose in the first round, if they lose in the second round, if maybe he gets exposed this this playoff season, maybe they match up with a team that just, pulls him out and just makes him not himself, that could complicate things a little bit.
Yeah, you could potentially see that in the next round if it is, in fact, Dallas that moves on there. That's exactly what they've done to Rudy Gobert.
Exactly.
In this current series with the Utah Jazz. So,
exactly. And Ayton, don't get me wrong, can do a lot more than Rudy Gobert. But what Calvin's saying is center position. There's a lot of things you can do to pull the center out of the game and make them not as effective as they should be. Mm-hmm. And if he averages 10 and 10 in that series or something and they lose, or even if they win, if I'm the owner that doesn't want to spend money, I'm kind of like, okay, why is this guy worth $200 million again? Because
the difference, sorry, go ahead.
Max contracts are one thing, but if you're the number 1 overall pick, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure. The difference between DeAndre Ayton playing the Phoenix Suns and Rudy Gobert playing the Phoenix Suns is DeAndre Ayton can actually get his own offense.
Yep.
He can score in a variety of ways, and he's going to have matchup advantages all series long against Dallas's big men. So that is the one big difference.
And
there.
Chris Paul always makes his center look good, right? Like even Tyson Chandler. You remember that dude in New Orleans? He looked incredible. And, no shade on Tyson Chandler. Love the guy. I thought he played excellent in New York and had a very productive NBA career. But Chris Paul, point guard, definitely makes it easier on his big men. That's for sure. Do you guys see the Washington Wizards trading Beal this offseason, or will they build a team surrounding him?
I've expected Bradley Beal to get traded from the Washington Wizards, or expected him to want or request a trade from the Washington Wizards for years now, and it just hasn't happened. He really continues to stay pat with the fact that he wants to be in Washington for God knows why, but I just, at this point, I don't really believe it. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf for me at this point, right? Like,
yeah,
I see him staying in Washington because that's what he has said over and over and over again, and he has backed that up every single year.
I agree with
Now,
Calvin.
whether they try or feel like they need to move on from him, that's a different question. But I don't see Washington doing that. They just got Porzingis. They have Kuzma, obviously, and he didn't Beal didn't play a single game with Porzingis this season because he's been out since February. But I think they roll with what they got here again.
I agree with Calvin on the fact that I've expected this guy to be traded for years now. Like, even when they had John Wall, I expected Bradley Beal to get traded. The only difference I see this season is that he's got a player option, $37 million for next year. They have not worked out a contract extension. If I'm the Wizards, I might be panicking a little bit here. And I might say, hey, you know, John Wall, we paid this guy this much money. What did he really do for our franchise, right? Like, incredible player, but did we win anything? No, we paid this guy a ton of money, and then he sat out years due to injury.
Yeah.
Porzingis.
And Bradley Beal's missed a lot of time, as of late too.
Porzingis, you owe him a ton of money. He could be a similar situation. But, if I'm the Wizards, I don't have any championship aspirations right now. And that's the goal of having a basketball team in the NBA, right, is to, like, win a championship. Bradley Beal is going to need a ton of help for anything like that, even close to happen. If he's on the last year of his deal and he's like, hey, I want to wait until the offseason to figure out what I'm doing, he's not restricted. You can't match any contract for him. So I expect Bradley Beal to be traded this offseason. I do.
Okay.
And it's just based on the fact that it's come to the end of the line here. If you're Washington, are you gambling on your team doing well next season to impress Bradley Beal and get him to re-sign? But at the same time, if Bradley Beal's telling them, hey, I want to re-sign, I think he'll stay. But I don't think that's going to happen, and I expect him to be traded. You want to know where? Sacramento.
Wow.
I would love that. I'm not predicting that, but I'm just saying I would love that. I would love that to happen. And I think it's possible. What's up, Steven? You're here. Trade Beal. John Wall sat on the bench. Yeah. Wild.
I don't think he made $100 million this year, but
pretty close. I think he was making like $45 million or something ridiculous.
I mean, that's not even half it, but whatever.
Did you guys also hear about the Pistons potentially giving Bagley a 3-year deal during this offseason?
I did see that report.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, happy for Marvin Bagley. Like, he seems to have found a home there. And the Pistons played a lot better, after the trade deadline. So, yeah, I mean, good for him.
Do they have an option? Like,
yeah.
What's really on this team that you're building around? They took a gamble getting this guy. They didn't give up a lot to get him, to Sacramento. Number 2 overall pick. I still think he's got a lot of good basketball ahead of him if he can stay healthy. We talked about yesterday the Joel Embiid situation, right, where this dude, 2 years in, 3 years in, you're like, oh, man, they wasted a pick on this guy because he is just injury prone. He turns it around and turns into, what'd you say, 1A, 1B with Jokic, best center in the league. Not that Marvin Bagley is going to be that guy, but if you're Detroit, you got to get something. And he's pretty much all you got at this point. So I don't know what the contract details are as far as like money-wise, but I'm giving him a 3-year deal just to see what I can get out of him. I'm not giving him a max, but far from that.
I don't think
they're I'm trying my best to re-sign this guy because I just traded for him, and he does have a high upside. He does.
Yeah.
All right. What do you think if the Kings draft his brother? Flame for Flurry. We are doing a live on Royal Rebounds here at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So that's about 45 minutes. So we will answer all your Kings questions then. It'll be interesting. But, we're going to have a fun time. Can't wait for next season. Let's fast forward through the rest of the playoffs.
No, don't fast forward. This is the best basketball you're seeing all year.
Yeah.
This is the
more
best
basketball.
time of year.
Yeah.
I mean, excited. It sucks if your team's not in the postseason. I get that, but I mean, who doesn't love playoff basketball?
Yep. All right, guys, we're going to end the show here. The bar is closing. It's last call. Make sure you guys close out your tabs. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode. As I mentioned, Calvin will be hosting tomorrow. I'll be on the road. I'll still be here in a limited capacity, but make sure you guys tune in tomorrow at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're Kings fans or if you just Calvin and Barry fans, make sure you guys head over to Royal Rebounds. We'll be live in about 45 minutes to discuss the Kings coaching search and all your burning Sacramento Kings questions. Make sure you guys like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good day, and don't forget to tip your bartender.